All right. Hi, everyone. Let's go ahead and get started today. We hope everyone is having an amazing start to your week. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're going to be covering navigating your responsibility in Atlassian Cloud, security, compliance, and data protection. We have a great panel with us today where we'll explore enhanced security, how to protect your data, effective incident response, access management, how to ensure compliance, and more. And overall, we hope that you leave empowered in crafting a comprehensive Atlassian Cloud security framework. I am very pleased to have with us Andy Fernandez, the Senior Director of Product Marketing at HYCU, Peter Hayes, our Practice Director of Managed Services here at C-Prime, and Kevin Powers, the founder and director of the Masters of Science program in Cybersecurity Policy and Governance at Boston College. So an awesome panel of experts. So very pleased to have all of you here with us. Welcome. And if you'd like to go through a more in-depth intro, go ahead.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. Actually, let's go with an intro first on Peter.
Hey, thank you, Stephanie. Thanks for pulling this together. Thanks, Andy and Kevin, for joining. My name is Peter Hayes. I'm the Practice Director of Managed Services at C-Prime. I've been with C-Prime just coming up onto 4-year anniversary. I've also been in the technology and SaaS industries since about 2008. So I've seen a lot of changes over the years, and really glad to be talking about this, having this conversation today. Thanks, Andy.
Thank you so much. And Kevin.
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Kevin Powers. I am the founder and director of the Masters of Science in Cybersecurity Policy and Governance at Boston College. I'm an attorney by trade. I've been an attorney for over 25 years, having worked in private industry and with the federal government, both with the Department of Justice, the Department of Defense, Department of the Navy, and then in-house counsel for a software company for many years. I'm also over at MIT, over at the Sloan School of Management, where I created a program focused on cybersecurity governance for board directors that we run 3 times a year out of MIT Executive Education. And I also serve on varying boards, whether with startups, then on a bank board here in Boston, Reading Cooperative Bank, where we handle over $1.3 billion. So it's pretty interesting, fun time to be out there. Cybersecurity, data privacy, and national security has been my work and business strategy for the past really 25 years. So happy to talk, and thanks for having me today here, Peter and Andy.
No, thank you so much, Kevin and Peter. I'm very, very excited for this conversation. Hi, everybody. I'm Andy. I'm on the product team here at HYCU. And what I'm excited about is this is a conversation. We're going to keep this very focused. If you have any questions, use the chat and the Q&A function, because Peter, Kevin, and I will answer these live and also answer any questions live at the end of the conversation. But what I'm excited about here is that in this conversation, we have a strategic partner in C-Prime as an Atlassian partner, as a subject matter expert. We have somebody with deep expertise on the legal, on the compliance side, and you also have a vendor. And for those who don't know, HYCU, we are the fastest data protection as a service vendor in the world, and we have a very strong focus in the world of Atlassian. So we're going to have a very balanced conversation here between partner, between vendor, between legal and compliance expert. And the entire focus is making sure that you walk away with an understanding of your risk profile, your responsibilities, and how to make sure that you can maximize the use of the cloud. And just a couple of notes here on the agenda. What we're going to talk a little bit about is kind of reminisce a little bit and talk about how we've seen such a fast acceleration from server to cloud, specifically not just in Atlassian Cloud, but everything in your DevOps and ITSM tool chain as well. And although there's an incredible amount of value in cloud, and all of us should be moving to these technologies, we have to understand our responsibility. With great power comes great responsibility. Sorry for the cliche there. And then we're going to get very specific to understand what those responsibilities are. Once I offload from server and data center to the cloud, whether that's Atlassian Cloud, whether it's AWS, whether it's Salesforce, what are my responsibilities? What's my risk profile? What should I be worried about? And then from there, we're going to double click on specifically identity access management and data protection. But please, this session is meant to be instrumental for you in your analysis of the cloud and how you can really understand how to land safely there and make the most of it. But the question here is why has cloud actually exploded? This is something that if we go back 10, 15 years ago, you would hear rumors of it. I think Peter, Kevin, we probably saw that first with SharePoint Server, right? And then Salesforce, and people saw these explosive business models, and now you start to see the proliferation of SaaS. But there's a huge reason why this is actually happening. One of the biggest ones is you are offloading a lot of responsibility. You are offloading a lot of management that requires resources, costs, even the depreciation of hardware. But you're also reducing a lot of security and continuity requirements. And of course, it's simple. Anyone with a credit card, whether security likes it or not, is able to spin up and provision a cloud resource. But Peter, in your expertise as a practitioner, somebody who's seen the entire evolution of the world of Atlassian from server to cloud, how have you seen this evolve?
Well, yeah, like you said, it really has exploded and evolved over time. Some of the main drivers are as you said, the actual server, actual hardware depreciation or managing that, like on premises. That was a huge overhead that has been significantly reduced. The cost effectiveness overall and the way to organize that. Of course, they all come with the additional responsibilities of understanding all of that as you move. But you can take all this from in-house to out of house, right? And so as long as you have trusted vendors and trusted partners to work with you during this transition, this can be a really cost-effective and smart move for anyone to make. And for years and years, it's been growing. And looking forward, I just see it continuing this trajectory. There's more and more services, more and more integrations happening really every month, if not every day.
Peter, that's absolutely correct. And one of the things that I like to use as an example is sometimes, and Kevin, you see this all the time in your practice around cybersecurity. You see these crazy statistics around every 5 seconds there's a ransomware attack. Last year there was $200 billion of ransomware attacks. Now, don't get me wrong; these threats, they're becoming very, very advanced. But so many times the people that actually fall victim to these threats was because of very simple human error that could be traced to somebody not patching correctly, not maintaining their infrastructure properly. And when you have this responsibility across your data center for all of these critical applications, that's a big responsibility. And it sounds easy and it's straightforward, but all of the time people still fall victim to these things. And your ability to offload that responsibility just simply from the maintenance and patching side already reduces a lot of that risk threshold that organizations carry. Now, and of course, that's not even to mention, Peter, right? Everything that we've seen around all of how easy it is to spin up new capabilities, interoperability, and integrations in cloud, not just in Atlassian, but in even your traditional infrastructure as a service as well. You just open up a world of capabilities that were not available to you in this traditional world of server and data center deployments. Now, on the other hand,
just to add to that quickly, that you can open up these capabilities without a lot of maintenance, without a lot of downtime. And you are just a lot of that sort of those maintenance windows and the sort of system upgrades are much more seamless for the end users for sure.
Absolutely. And even this sounds simple, but even the ability to pivot very quickly to best of breed solutions and new services is no longer requiring a committee meeting and 2 months to provision a VM for something. Right now, it is simply, does this make sense for our business? Does this make sense for our security team? Let's go and make that move. And within a day, you are unlocking that value that has been discussed. So that's a huge, huge component. Now,
testing too, right? And testing, you can spin something up and test it and see if it meets your needs on really specific use cases and see if it meets your business needs.
100%. And this is sometimes the externalities that people don't realize they're receiving until they don't have it anymore. And that's a critical thing to see. Now, however, obviously there is the vendor side, and smaller organizations, mid-sized organizations rapidly adopting cloud. But we've also seen the largest companies in the world also adopt cloud and make the most of it. Kevin, from your perspective, just in the last couple of years, from the days of SharePoint Server, where that was a novel idea, to where we are today, where SaaS is pretty much a de facto standard, how have you seen the world of security and compliance evolve towards that?
Yeah, to the point, like if I make a statement, it's like it's almost you're negligent if you're not using the cloud. From a business perspective, it's much more secure in many ways than if you have your own network system. Like think how much the cost involved with that. So if you're a mid-sized company, a small business, or a large business, they're all on the cloud too. This is, you do the cost benefit analysis, everything Peter talked about and you just talked about. Like, yeah, well, let's move to the cloud. It's safer up there. It's a risk reducer. But with that comes the obvious piece, right? It is, way back when people didn't want to go to the cloud because like, what do you mean I'm going to be sharing my business data with another company? There was a lot of concern with that. Now we're past that and there's a recognition like we're going to share, you have the NDAs in place. The real issue comes down to that whatever you put in the cloud, if it's PII, non-public customer data, that goes up in the cloud. It's still your responsibility. Okay, so you still have to protect it. You have to make sure the vendor you're working with, you have to do your due diligence. You can't just rely on a memo they send up to you. Many contracts, you see them all the time. They're pushed down. They'll have certain requirements and a vendor will sign off on it. You need to make sure they're actually doing what they're saying. So in your company, whether it's small, mid-size, if you just have managed services, you have to make sure those personnel are actually making sure that the cloud provider you're working with is doing what they're saying they're doing. So the liability all sticks with you. And if there's a data breach and it ends up being like, oh, the cloud provider caused it, well, it's going to come back to you because you're going to look and see, well, actually, were they following best practices? What were the best standards they were supposed to be doing? And what were you doing when all your customer data was in there? Were you monitoring? Were you doing your due diligence? So, yeah, I think, if you are a small business, yeah, what are you doing with having anything on your own personal network? You can't even manage it. Get it up in the cloud, but then understand that you have responsibilities that flow from all of that.
100%. And Kevin, I think that brings us very well to this discussion point. And I think the standard here of discussion is the cloud is an incredible amount of value. It makes the most sense for your business, not only from a security perspective, funny enough, but also from the capabilities that you unlock. But what we've seen often too many times is that organizations, once they give up, once you no longer see it in the data center, once you no longer can touch your physical applications, there's almost a complete removal of responsibility. But what we've seen completely in the world is this renewed focus on third-party risk. And there's so many examples here, we can talk through this, but the whole point here is organizations all of a sudden think, oh, there's this new world of third-party risk. Well, no, it's always been there, but organizations haven't always been extremely responsible for it. We've seen this, with the elephant in the room with CrowdStrike. We've seen this with Snowflake. We've seen this with every single major provider. These risks are going to happen. Now, the question is, how do you as an organization, getting all of this benefit, both from an operational perspective, from a security perspective, how do you take advantage of this, but also insulate yourself from this third-party risk? And the reason I wanted to visualize this here is we're having a discussion around Atlassian Cloud, around the value of Atlassian Cloud. And what are the specific things to look at to make sure that you are completely protected and that you can make the most of it? But it's not just Atlassian, it's everything around your DevOps tool chain, everything from what repository you're using for, what are the actual cloud services and infrastructure that you're responsible for, and of course, everything in the service catalog within IT as well. This is a very, very important thing to understand. When you think third party, what we're really talking about here is Atlassian Cloud, GitHub, all of these other AWS, Google Cloud, Azure. These are critical services. And the lessons that we learned today in our discussion with Peter, in our discussion with Kevin, apply to every single cloud application. And Peter as somebody who's driving so much of these hosting services, has to deal with all of these types of applications and is an expert in kind of understanding how that works. But what I wanted to share here was double click on this world of SaaS, right? Where we now know that this is a de facto. Governments, the world's largest financial institutions, are using cloud and SaaS applications because it makes sense for them. But what we're seeing now, though, is a massive gap in their understanding of their responsibility of this. So the team here at HYCU, we decided to commission a third-party survey and make sure that it was global, over hundreds of IT leaders. We're talking CISOs, CIOs, VPs, directors of IT, all over the world, and asking them several questions about their environment, around their behavior, around their security posture. And this is something that I'm going to mention because it's the most dangerous component. The first thing that we understood was that every single organization underestimated their SaaS footprint by 10x. What I mean by that is the average response was when an IT leader was asked, how many SaaS applications do you have? They would respond by saying 22. And in reality, we're talking about over 200 SaaS applications on average for a mid-sized organization. I'll give you an example. At HYCU, we have, Kevin, probably over around 300 employees. Peter, how many SaaS applications do you think HYCU at 300 employees is using?
Well, I'd like to say 20, but I'm going to guess that it's a lot more.
Yes, over 70, Peter.
Yeah.
Over 70. Why? We run a SaaS. We're a cloud native company that requires a ton of different SaaS applications and cloud services to rely on. And we have 300 employees.
One of the things is it's really straightforward to get one of these applications initiated, right? It's so, and there's really this, as we're talking about responsibilities, there's some of these safeguards from an organization level are they still need to be worked on, and they still need to be understood by the entire organization.
And Peter, what's interesting here too is how quickly an application, even inside Atlassian, can become mission critical.
Yeah.
So for example, all it takes is a marketing leader to standardize project management on Jira. I won't say Jira Work Management now, just Jira. Or for a product management team like the one I'm on to standardize using Jira Product Discovery. In just 2 weeks, you now have some of the most critical data in the organization. And not understanding exactly how many of those you have could be extremely, extremely dangerous. Even to make up this webinar and this event that we've had today, we're using several SaaS applications, right? We're hosting this on Zoom. What happens if Zoom someone accidentally deletes the Zoom recordings and this is gone forever? We are using an email service. We use Google Workspace in order to create the application, and then we're going to host it somewhere as well. Like those are 4 to 5 applications just to get this going. Now, Kevin, the part that scared me the most wasn't just people are completely underestimating how many of these applications that they have, but the fact is that the majority of these breaches that we're reporting in the organization came from SaaS at the source. Why do you think there's such a disparity in between the rigor that we apply to our on-prem applications and our tier 1 VMs, and then all of a sudden we see this lack of discipline in the world of SaaS? Why do you think that is?
Well, it's not only why I think it's just the fact is because a lot of times the people purchasing the SaaS platforms aren't the IT group. Like you talked about marketing, they might buy a nice, great SaaS platform they want to use, and they're not going to tell IT about it. They're not going to talk to the CISO or whoever does their security. So now you have all these SaaS platforms, like you talked about, like we have 22. Well, that's great. If that's coming from the CEO, the business lead, the chief operating officer, and then the 72 that are being used, that's a problem. That means we don't have management or oversight of these SaaS platforms. So when you see a 61% breaches are caused by SaaS alone, that just tells you there's no controls over that. There's no security overseeing it. And one of the biggest breaches of last year was the city of Oakland. And that came back in, and it was about, it was caused by SaaS platforms. That's what they said. I remember I was interviewed out there along with your CEO, Simon Taylor. And it came up like, what's a SaaS platform? How could this be? And it was ultimately they couldn't get back to business. They couldn't provide the most basics to their citizens because they didn't have backups of all these SaaS platforms they were using. And most of them, they didn't even know they were using for really essential business purposes. So yeah, that's why, it's more than 50%, it's 61%. They don't have the security in place.
Absolutely. Let's grab something like DocuSign. For very large organizations, that's usually in the IT service catalog, and there's an IT team mostly responsible. It's under 2FA, their best practices. But many organizations, DocuSign was paid for and is managed by a CFO's team or the legal team or sales. And they're incredibly talented, but they're not security people.
Yeah, and it's not managed. That's just not true. It's not managed. They're using it and they don't know the technology. They don't know what happens. Most of the time, they don't even know where the signed documents go and where they store it.
Exactly. And think of the critical information, the PII, the PCI that's involved in DocuSign, right? So that's just one example, but that applies to your CRM. That applies to the CMS that we're all using to host our websites. This applies to everything. We know how critical Atlassian, how critical our Git repositories, our M365 is, because IT is pretty much aware of this, but there's so many other applications that are as critical that people don't realize. But the reason, Kevin, we got to that 61% is because of this next finding, which was that nearly half of the folks, when asked about all responsibility, they assumed that it was the SaaS's responsibility, that it was the vendor's responsibility. This is the root of the problem, because SaaS and cloud, we know, is actually much more secure. There's a lot less room for margin of error, because somebody else is professionally managing this for you. But because we're not even accounting for the basics of understanding our responsibility, this is why we see third-party risk, because somebody in legal has password as the password, or because somebody simply procured something without understanding the third-party risk. This is the crux of today's conversation, is people not understanding their responsibility, because it is safe, but it's not infallible, and you have to make sure that you have a good understanding. So what we're going to talk through now is really understand what are the keys for you, whether you are on the IT team, on the engineering side, on security. What are some of the very simple things that you can do that give you all the benefit of the cloud, but you always know that you have the right approach from a security perspective? And the first thing that I want to touch on is actually what could go wrong, because this is the part, Peter, that happens all the time, where on-prem, you're fully aware of the risk because you are responsible for the recovery of the risk. But if you're not aware of your responsibility anymore, you kind of stop thinking about what could go wrong. So the one thing that I want to talk through here is understanding data loss scenarios. And of course, across all SaaS, it's kind of the same. There's human error, there's the chance of even external or insider threats. But even in the world of Atlassian, Peter, we see so many different scenarios where there's a potential for you to lose that data. What's been your perspective and even your real life experience on this?
Well, I think, looking at the list here, human error, as much as we want to trust everyone and to be making the right choices, it can be pretty easy to just simply click away a warning or button or anything, and you can have some implications that are, you just don't know the consequences of it, right? And so you just say, okay, I want to do this, so I'm going to do this, and it's not ill intention, right? But it is an error nonetheless, and it can have some long lasting consequences. Same with misconfigurations, or maybe an effort to consolidate or clean up some of your processes. Again, human error, you might say, well, I can combine these two configs to make them work, to optimize them, not knowing that they each are going to have a consequence when you press that button. So there are, of course, always insider and external threats that you have to be aware of. But, honestly, the majority come from knowing your responsibility, knowing what happens, and having some group somewhere in your organization that you can go to for answers, right? So, and just to balance that out a little bit, with the management of all of this, with your security team, I don't think anyone wants to slow down the pace of business, right? So we want to make sure that if you need something spun up and you need to solve a problem, and your legal team or your marketing team or whomever needs something to happen, that no one wants to slow anything down, right? But we do need to have some sort of basics of training and understanding what is going on, where those documents live, who has access, who should have access, and some of the basic controls. And that can be done in a pretty straightforward and streamlined way, so that no one is negatively impacted from a speed perspective.
And if I can jump in to follow what Peter said, I mean, if you look at cybersecurity, it is not a siloed IT approach. It's a holistic approach, right? So if you're in the security side, you should be having talks with the business lines, your compliance, your risk, your legal. You should be talking to everyone about this. So if Andy, you were going to bring in a new technology that you wanted to use, you should know, and you should have that relationship with the security team, the IT team, and there should be policies in place that before anything gets hooked on or buttoned on, it goes through security, gets signed off on, and everyone's there together. Because like what Peter said is really the business of business is business, right? And everyone understands that, and the security team understands that, the legal team understands that, but there's guardrails in place. You can't just go right out there, because that's what happens when you have 61% of attacks caused by SaaS platforms, because no one knows about them. So anything, you have to have the policies, the procedures in place, and that's just the best practice.
Absolutely. And I think to recap this too, it's not that there are new threats in SaaS. It's the same old stuff, right? You're running and you're provisioning services based on somebody else's hardware. But guess what? You can still delete stuff. You can make a mistake. You can have a disgruntled employee or a contractor in your organization decide to go on a deletion spree or an encryption party. These are, if I were to look at it as a heat map, right, Peter and Kevin, I would put human error as the reddest possible, because we can pretty much guarantee that human error is going to happen. It's very rare that you get insider threats, but it's important to know that it's not impossible. And it does happen.
That's a human too.
More than people think. Yeah.
The tech works fine. It's how we implement it, how we oversee it, and how we monitor it. I mean, that's really what it comes down to.
It's just the people at the end of the day, right? Whether you're making a mistake or you're making a bad decision, these things do happen. And it's very critical to understand. I've migrated to the cloud. Amazing. I have reduced my risk profile, but I need to understand what's my concept and responsibility when it comes to someone on my team or a contractor making a mistake, or somebody deciding that they're disgruntled. And the rule of thumb that I've kind of provided to some of our customers was, if you no longer can name the amount of developers that you have, you are now in an area where somebody could be disgruntled, because this is no longer a friends and family. It's no longer a startup. You are running a large organization, and things can go wrong. But this is where we now get into the crux of the matter around understanding your responsibilities. And the reason I put together this discussion around shared responsibility was, you have the same exact legal model, the same exact approach, just very different pretty pictures around how that responsibility is displayed. And what I'm showing you is AWS, Google, Azure, and Atlassian's Cloud's shared responsibility model. They look different, but they say exactly the same thing. And what I want to get to the point here is, it's treating it like a garage. And so let's discuss, like, for example, Kevin, you're in Boston, you decide to go to Seaport for a day. You want to park your car in the garage. Now, what do you expect from the garage? You expect that the garage is on, that you can pay, that the lights are on, and then when you come back, the car is there. Mm-hmm. But if you leave your window open, if somebody steals a laptop inside of the car, or they scratch it, or somebody hits your car, the garage doesn't take responsibility for it. It just doesn't. This is now your responsibility. And that is the exact analogy when it comes to using a vendor, aka a system, versus you and your responsibilities as a tenant. Kevin, from a legal standpoint and somebody in the field, how do you interpret the shared responsibility model?
Yeah, and on that one too is, you can contract your way out of a lot of things, but you can't contract your way out of your standard of care. So if we're working with a SaaS platform or cloud provider, and they say, oh, by the way, all the security measures we have in place, you agree that that's the best practice. Well, that doesn't give them the ability just to give you a lower practice, right? Like, and I'm just using this as general. They have to follow the standards that are applied by the law. And if they're not, the responsibility falls on them. They can't contract out of that. Those requirements are in place. But when you look at the shared responsibility model, it's a two-way street. I'm going to bring in this vendor. Well, I'm going to do my due diligence. I'm going to make sure they are following, and, you say best practice, just applicable law, whatever industry. If I'm in financial services and I'm licensed in New York, we'll just use New York DFS. So I'm going to make sure they comply with that. They have all those protocols in place. But then the shared side is, well, I also have to abide by that too. So I have to make sure when I bring them on, and this goes right to what Peter just talked about, how I configure, how I hook up to that cloud, how I send that information up there, and then how I monitor and make sure that everything they're doing is in line with the DFS Part 500, but also my business, and it's aligned and able to integrate to all the other SaaS platforms or other things I'm using on my network. So that's the responsibility. And I think you saw that with, I think it was the Citi case with Amazon. It ultimately came down to Citigroup was like liable because they misconfigured the hookup into the cloud, to use it in plain language. So yeah, it's a shared responsibility, but both sides share equally in that. The real issue is the liability for the data falls on you. So if the cloud provider does something wrong and they're the data breach, yeah, like it comes back to you through the regulators. But also you'd have to go after them too to get recompensation as well. You saw that with Delta Airlines too, and that's a battle. You want to make sure you're working in sync. You just don't sign them up. You monitor and you know what they're doing.
Right.
And they're trusted.
Absolutely. But one thing to note here too, though, is it's not fair to expect the cloud vendor to understand everything that's going on inside of your tenant. What I mean by that is things like Jira, things like Bitbucket, they have extremely high change rates. Peter knows that better than anybody else. It's impossible for Atlassian to understand what is a good delete versus a bad delete. There is no mechanism to do so, to understand what that is. That's why a lot of that responsibility does fall in the customer, because only you as the user actually knows, is this project meant to be archived? Is it meant to be used? Am I cleaning up my projects? Am I cleaning up these issues? Only you as the user are the one who's going to know that. It's impossible for the vendor to differentiate and to be able to do so in a very, very secure environment.
No, and I think a great way to think of this, and just use the GDPR, and it's the terms. Like, I'm the data controller. The data's mine. I give it to you, you process it, but I control it and I control how you process it. And that's the key there. Ultimately, it's with me. It's that responsibility you talk about.
100%. That's actually a great example. I might steal that.
I'm sure you will. I know you will.
Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So, Peter, one of the things I do want to pause here, because we are talking about risk and the things that you have to do, but something that people forget is all of the value of Atlassian Cloud and what you no longer have to do. Once you let go of server, once you're no longer hosting this and data center, and you are a cloud subscription, what are the things that you can 100% let go of, and what is Atlassian responsible for?
Well, the hosting and the networking and the backups and the backup system, the high availability, the DR systems, those are really critical functions that are, they're critical to know that they're being managed, right? You just need to, you can take this sort of giant bucket of worry and you just put it over, and what I love about the shared responsibility idea is that it's shared. And so what this always brings to mind to me is it's a partnership. It's a trusted partnership. It's a we both know what we need to do in order to keep everything safe. We need to educate everyone on how this works, everyone in the organization. But in the end, it's about a partnership, and it's about understanding where those lines are and how everyone can work together to really make it a safe and secure situation. Hosting will take care of all these technical side of things, but as we're talking about the data and the specific business requirements and business processes and those super details are really your responsibility to understand how they're configured and how they're managed.
100%. One of the areas to think about this, right, is just from the perspective of it's easy to imagine scenarios where, okay, if there's an outage, who's responsible for that outage? Well, it's easy. It's Atlassian. Whoever's hosting the service is responsible. If the lights are off in the garage, you as a car owner, you don't have to worry about that. It's on the garage to deal with. It's not your problem anymore. It's at the garage in your house. So the general statement here is if there are major attacks, if somebody launches an incredible DDoS attack on Atlassian, which people do on every SaaS vendor, it's not on you. Don't worry. There's an entire team of experts devoted to maintaining availability, security, and uptime in Atlassian. If you're curious, there is an Atlassian Cloud shared responsibility model, full breakdown that they provide, and they show you everything in painstaking detail between what they're responsible for and what you are. And I know that the team at C Prime has actually created almost an interpretation infographic of this, and you will be able to have access at the end of the presentation. But the point here is to secure the system, they need to make sure that it's secure, that there's availability, that they have system level backups. But then it's very important to understand what you're responsible for. And Peter has already mentioned this, right? Atlassian can't control if you set your password as password run. That is outside of their control.
Or if your laptop doesn't even have a password on it, right? Like, I mean, those are the endpoints protections that need to be standard across everything.
Exactly. And Atlassian can't control. They can provide you the ability to enable MFA and single sign-on. Yeah. They can do everything they can. But if your team on the departmental side outside of IT hasn't worked with you to connect that, or they're treating it as shadow IT, there's nothing that they can do. This is still a very basic requirement for you as the customer to be able to leverage. And one thing that I do want to mention here is something that people struggle with, though, is they see that Atlassian is responsible, Peter, for system level backups. But then Atlassian tells them, but you're responsible for backup. And that's a big challenge to understand the difference between a system level backup and what backups are responsible for here. And the example I'll provide, Peter, you can probably provide some anecdotes here too, is if there's a DR scenario, let's say there's a massive outage, Atlassian is responsible for recovering that. They're going to use replication. They have to get the system back up and running. But they have to use backups to reinstantiate that environment so that when you log back on, all that data is still there. This is known as a system level backup. But those backups are not optimized to go after Acme Corporation in New Jersey of 3 users who's deleted this specific issue inside of this specific project. It is almost impossible to do that in a distributed manner. So Atlassian says, look, we have backups at the system level. They are for doomsday scenarios. You need backups for you at the instance level to be able to effectively recover. Now, there's 2 things that we're going to focus on here because there's a lot, but really at the end of the day, if you master these 2 things, you are using the cloud and you are effectively very, very safe as an organization. And the first one, as Peter already mentioned a little bit with endpoint protection, is also identity access management. Simply how you control people accessing the software that you subscribe to is the most fundamental important step. But Atlassian actually does provide you with the tools and the ability to do so. Peter, if you want to give us a little bit of the rundown on how Atlassian does this with Guard.
Sure. So at a super high level, but the main thing here is that you want to control the user access, right? And the reason for this is because you may need to change someone's permissions quickly, right? Either just for process, right? You have a new employee, you don't want them to wait a week to get access to each and every single one of their systems, right? At this, also, if you have someone who is leaving, or even someone who's changing roles, right, from one department to another, you want to be able to do that efficiently. You don't want to have to click those buttons 20 times for each app. So having the identity tool in place is really critical, just from a visibility and efficiency point of view, right? So the other thing here is in terms of Guard, that I really like is the visibility into what your users are doing, where they are, what you can see from that. And a quick example is that there was a client who had, I think the number was 36 users who were sort of unaccounted for, right? And it was a little bit of a red flag to say, okay, well, thank you for showing us this number. Now we need to dig in there and figure out exactly, how they came to be associated here. So but just having that insight in these dashboards is really, really important. To you can systematically review and have monitoring in place, but you also have to, at the end of the day, you do have to have a human to be like reading this, interpreting this, and letting those flags come up. From a human standpoint, you can set alerts for many, many, many things, but you can't set alerts for everything. So you do have to have really intuitive dashboards so that you can see what's going on.
Absolutely. Peter, this actually talks a little bit about the value of cloud, because when you're on-prem, you are using either something like Active Directory, right, to manage network access, or even things like Okta as well, or other IDP providers. Now they control access, but they don't go deeper than that. They're not telling you the specific analytics and insights specific to the usage inside of Atlas. When you go to cloud, obviously you still have your IDP provider, you have your SSO that you're using, but Atlassian actually provides you even more capabilities to understand certain levels of malicious activity in the future. What are some of the policies that you have in place? There's levels to this that you actually unlock more IAM capabilities, as long as you know that it's your responsibility. That's the biggest piece, right? Everything is there, exactly. The tooling is there. You have to take control of it, because legally
you have to enable it. You have to be able to you have to set it up according to your policies that you work with your security team to implement. And once you have that environment in place, those systems in place, those processes in place, it really can ensure that you are on the path to understanding the activities that are harmless, and the activities that potentially are raising red flag, to the activities that are definitely like someone needs to look at it now, right? So you can view all that when you have a solution like Guard in place.
Yeah, and on that, Peter, when you talked about like your security team, many businesses don't have a security team, right? And that's where you would come in your team, like managed services. And can you talk a bit about that, how that works?
Well, so we at C-Prime personally, we work with our security team every day, right? So that we are aligned, so that everyone is on the same page. And but we also have the processes that we built so that we can like these different thresholds of alerting set up, so that we can understand the things that don't need attention, but when they do need attention, we need to know right away, and we need to be able to act on them. And then, of course, there's a lot of judgment in between those there, where you need someone who's expert enough to interpret this, to look into it, to dig into it, to do some research, and really figure out, is it a user who's just doing something well-intentioned but incorrectly, or is it an actual threat? And so we definitely need to pay attention to that all the time. And this is something that is really, really critical to make sure that everyone is doing.
Yeah,
And
and
this,
I didn't mean to
okay.
interrupt. My whole point of that was like you want to make sure you have the experts setting this up for you. And a lot of times, as companies, they're like, "Hey, I'm going to get like I'm going to do this," and then you might have the best technology and the best product, but if you don't know how to manage it, set it up, everything falls back on you. So sorry to interrupt.
No, Kevin, that's a very good point that you brought up. And the reason I mentioned is when you're managing, 20 years ago, everything was a server on-prem. So
Yeah.
you had a standard network, a standard firewall procedure, access control is standardized. But now with all of this feature, all of this function, all this best of breed, every SaaS, it's its own universe in a way.
Yeah.
And you need to work with somebody who understands that universe, from how to leverage Atlassian Guard with offboarding policies to what are my branch protection rules in GitHub. You need that support because they all have their own religion, for lack of a better term. Don't know if that's appropriate, but they are their own universe, and it tells you exactly what you are responsible for. That's very,
And
very
not
important to
only are
understand.
they their own universe, but they are interacting and integrating with all these other universes, right? And so every integration is a potential place for making sure that it's done correctly.
Kevin, we might need to adjust the physics department at Boston College to talk about the universe of SaaS as well, because I think that's critical. But Kevin, I wanted to bring this up, and just to recap, there's two things that we talked about: IAM and backup. The tooling is there for IAM. You just need to know how to use it. You just need to know that it's your responsibility to protect your endpoints and to protect your account. It's all there. And it's very easy once you have the guidance and the partners like Cprime that can help you do so. But Kevin, this one, it gets a little bit trickier in the sense that there are system level backups, right, that the vendor has. And let's say that something bad does happen. And then the like many people do, I accidentally go and delete a bunch of projects. For the first time, I'm finding out that it's my responsibility to recover this. And I know that the vendor has at least like system level backups. Do I have a legal right for them to recover that? Like, where does that sit from a legal perspective?
It's actually, this is a great point, because there's not a regulation out there right now. So just assume every regulation that applies to you, no matter what industry you're in, requires you to have an incident response plan. And part of that is a disaster recovery data backup plan. And you have to test it, okay, at least once. So that means like doing a tabletop. So if you're testing it, right, and you're a SaaS provider, and I go to you and say, okay, what happens to my data? There's a data breach and it's on you and I can't access it. Do you back it up? And the answer, you're going to get the answer is like, no, that's on you. Well, that means you got to go back up that data, because if you don't, you're going to be in a load of hurt with the regulators and plaintiffs counsel coming after you. And that could put you out of business. So what I'm saying there is that you have this data, you can't rely on the SaaS platform, because you have to test it. You have to see if they actually, and then you're going to find out what you just said, this whole system backup, I'm not going to be able to get my data. So you think of CDK, right? What happened with the car dealerships. I lived this one. I went to a car dealership to buy a car, and the guy rips out a pen and paper. And he's like, yeah, our system's gone. This is what happened. And like I talked more. Well, think of that. They didn't test that backup recovery system. If they did, at least they would have the data to conduct their business, right? But they didn't, and they couldn't access it. So the law requires it. So if you just rely on the SaaS platform and assume, you can't assume anything. Shame on you, because liability-wise, you didn't do your due diligence and you weren't following the law. So that's really something to stress to everyone here. And you can say, well, this law doesn't apply to me. And like, guess what? They do. And this is what the requirement of every law out there right now does require. And you can look at it, whether it's the SEC, the FTC, New York DFS, DORA, NIS2, look at the state privacy laws. Guess what? Yeah, you got to back up your data, and you better test it and make sure you can get it if there is a disaster.
Kevin, did you get the car for free in that case, or did you still have to pay?
No, but it was a great conversation, because the guy's like, so what do you do? And I'm like, cybersecurity data backup.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
And then I had explained to him what happened.
Incredible. So that's the point, though, right? It's, you have a responsibility. The tooling is there for you, and you just have to make sure that you exercise it and that you use it correctly, because at the end of the day, it's still your data. A governing body is not going to care if you're saying, well, I thought that they did it. No, it's legally, it's your responsibility. But guess what? The tooling is there.
You know it's not backed up. So you should read that contract. And if you don't have a lawyer reading it or someone who understands contracts, well, that's shame on you again.
Yeah. And one thing that Atlassian does incredibly well, though, is not only are they explicitly telling you, like I'm showing you here, this is an excerpt from the shared responsibility model. They're saying, look, your role in all caps is to create backups of your data. And they do generally also provide some form of capabilities, especially if you're a smaller organization. They have an API and they have a backup manager. You can export this data, right? So even if you're a smaller organization, a couple of users, you can at least export this, keep this somewhere safe. Ideally, not a hard drive on your desk where if you go on vacation, no one can access the backups because you have a single point of failure. But organizations also have the ability to build, script, and schedule these backups as well. The challenge, however, here is, yes, this makes sense to check the box, but it can be very problematic from a recovery perspective. So what Atlassian is,
not only problematic, but there's some technical expertise that's required. So you know, to restore from this type of backup, right? It does check the box, you know, technically, but it's not from experience. It's not always just like, you know, you have someone who can just restore it in a minute, right? There's a lot of nuance there that you need someone to be restoring this once it's done that way.
And Peter, there's a lot of nuance here too, and not only around, is the data encrypted when it's being moved? What is the schedule like? What is the policy like? Am I fulfilling a daily backup policy? Is this stored in a safe location? Okay, is this just a bulk recovery, or can I restore specific things? If there's a ransomware attack in my organization, is the data logically separated? This checks the box, and it's, by the way, the most important thing of this webinar is that you take IAM and backup seriously, regardless of the vendor that you choose. Like, that's the most important piece. But if you're a mid-sized organization, if you're an enterprise, you're going to have to think very critically about the capabilities that you require for backup and recovery. But the good news is that not only does Atlassian provide the APIs and the native tooling to at least check the box in certain scenarios, but they also work with backup companies like ourselves. In fact, we're an Atlassian Ventures company because they see the challenge, they see the ability that organizations lacked, and now they've been able to address it with organizations like HYCU as well. So one, just for 30 seconds, because really today, I want everyone to walk away with just understanding their responsibility and the fact that they have to go and make a decision on how are we leveraging IAM, how are we backing up data. But for those organizations that really understand the fact that building, scheduling, scripting, backups is going to be time consuming and it's going to have a very, very high corruption rate, it's very critical to understand what are the options out there that are enterprise class for backup and recovery. And that's HYCU our cloud. We're an Atlassian Ventures firm. We partner with C Prime to be able to deliver this. And just as a 20-second view of this, all backups are automated of your projects. You can restore at any time an entire project or a specific asset or a specific asset type or a specific issue, even down to the attachment. But the most critical part of today's conversation is that all of this data is automatically and encrypted sent to your customer storage, to your own storage, not to yet another third-party risk, right, Kevin? You don't want to add yet another third party to protect your third parties. You want to make sure that all that data is centralized and only in your control. And then, of course, you can protect things across your entire DevOps workflow, from Atlassian to AWS. And that's what HYCU is able to do. There's so many conversations that Peter and Kevin and I can have about the difference in value between a manual or scripted backup operation versus a backup and data protection platform. But today's focus of the conversation was really understanding if you're thinking about moving to Atlassian Cloud, and it does make a lot of sense, it's very, very critical to have a partner that you can trust, both with the expertise and the customer obsession to be able to help you manage this universe like we talked to about Atlassian. And Peter, I know that you probably want to provide a little bit of guidance to the audience around how C Prime is able to do that.
Sure. Just really quickly, we do have a lot of resources that we'll send with the recording and with the slide. But essentially, C Prime, we partner with Atlassian, we partner with HYCU. We have a ton of experience in the Atlassian space, from support to hosting to migration. So C Prime is a great resource to partner and answer any Atlassian questions you might have. So please feel free to reach out. Anyone from any of our multiple expert teams can be happy to help.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Peter. I'm actually going to address one question from the audience. And it's actually a great question. It's based on the research that I shared at the beginning. And the question was, as per your research, 61% of breaches have a SaaS source. Could you please share the percentage of SaaS versus non-SaaS applications footprint at those companies? That's an amazing question. And what I'll do is I'll actually work with them to grab the raw data and understand exactly what the distribution was of that 61%. So for the person asking that, we will follow up with you to provide that data with you, because that's a very, very important question.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And since we are nearing the end of our time together, I want to make sure everyone here knows how to keep the conversation going with us. Like Peter mentioned, we will be sending out the recording and the slides. In addition to that, those links to our relevant resources will be included in there in case you want to learn a little bit more. But if you do have any questions that you want to talk about, any feedback you want to share, just reach out to us at learn@cprime.com. You can also check out all of our other resources at the resources section of our website, and an easy way to stay up to date on everything we're doing, upcoming webinars, new thought leadership that is constantly coming out, is just to follow us on LinkedIn at cprime-inc. Now that we have gone through, it is time for our Q&A actually. I know, Andy, you had just addressed the question with Summit, and we just had one come through from Annette. She asked, can you share the data of this answer to this with the rest of the attendees also? So yeah, it seems like everyone's interested in knowing that as well. And 100%, we can definitely follow up. So just look out for an email in your inbox.
I have some homework, Stephanie, so I will take the action on this meeting to discuss. I will work with the agency and we will understand what that footprint is. We also have a full breakdown of this report that we will make available to you, but I will follow up and you will receive an email with that answer as well.
Okay, awesome. So it looks like that is the end of our time together, and hopefully we answered everyone's questions. But again, like I said, you're always welcome to reach out to us at any time if something does come up that you can't think of now. I want to give a huge thank you to Andy, Kevin, and Peter for your time today. Really, really appreciate it. In addition to that, I want to thank our audience for taking time out of your day to join us. We really appreciate you coming on and hope that you got value out of this webinar.